Hi there, I'm Mark Gray Mendez, a proud member of TJ's class of 2003 and the Director of Development and Outreach for the TJ Partnership Fund. And I am thrilled today to be joined by a member of TJ's class of 2001, currently serving as the Executive Vice President and General Manager for the Baltimore Orioles, Mr. Mike Elias. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to do this.
So I wanted to ask, when thinking about sort of your process of beginning to apply to the school and so on, what was it that made you want to go to TJ or apply to it in the first place?
I had a very kind of unique experience with getting into TJ and how it all came about. I grew up in Northern Virginia as an elementary school student, and I went to a gifted and talented program in Greenbrier West, which is it's right across from Chantilly High School, and had a lot of friends there that ended up going to TJ. But right as I was graduating, sixth grade, our family moved to Ohio, and so I went and did my middle school years in my freshman year of high school outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And then my dad got transferred back to the Washington, D.C. area after my freshman year of high school. So I applied to Jefferson. I was very aware of it because I had grown up in the area, and a lot of my friends from elementary school had just kind of gone there and more of a normal route. But I ended up applying as a sophomore transfer, which I'm not even sure if they do that anymore. But at the time, there was only like a handful of them, and it was a little bit of a unique application process. But I was very set on getting in, and was really excited about the school just from what I'd known about it and heard from it. And I was a baseball player and kind of made some contact before getting in with transfer with Jim Julian, who was the baseball coach then. And he did enough homework to know that I could probably help the team, and was certainly looking forward to me coming as well. So it just worked out really well for me and my family, and I was fortunate that I got in.
Very, very cool. Yeah, we do still have what we call the Froshmore program over here.
Okay.
So it's sort of a small segment of kids who come in and sort of backfill some of the folks who maybe transition out during the course of their freshman year. And I'm sure a lot of the kids who are in that position will be thrilled to know that somebody like you fits into the same category as they did. That's very cool. In thinking back to your time at Jefferson, I'm curious to know, what some of the fond memories that you might have, either within the classroom or from a social perspective, some of the events maybe that went on during the school year. What are the things that you think back on when you remember your time at Jefferson?
Oh boy, I don't know where to start. I mean, my experience was very baseball focused, so I must admit that takes up a large part of the memory bank. We happened to have a very good team in my class that year. It's kind of rare. Honestly, we should have won the state title, but we got upset in the regional finals. And we had several guys that went on to play college baseball, and a guy that got drafted. And so it was a really good team, and we were very focused on winning, not just for ourselves, but for the pride of the school at that time. It was in the Concord district, which has a lot of the big athletic schools. I think TJ's in something else now, but it was like Chantilly and Centerville and a lot of the really big schools. And to be able to beat them meant a lot to us. But having started in Northern Virginia and then leaving and then coming back to a sort of a academically oriented school, I really realized how much I missed it when I was away. Just the stimulation that you get from being around so many bright kids everywhere you look, and how that kind of drives you forward is something not to take for granted. And also the school, especially when we got to be seniors, treated us with so much latitude and respect, and it was a very, I think, unique experience in that regard, and it's why it's the best high school in the country.
Love it. I can definitely speak to the experience of being in the Concord district. I played with Justin Warren, who I'm sure was a key member of that team as well that you played with.
Yeah, he was the shortstop.
Yep. So he was with us as the point guard on the basketball team for the 2 years that I was on the varsity, and Yeah, a real special athlete, but competing in the Concord for basketball was no picnic either. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that was even tougher
Yep.
for sure.
So good stuff. So I'm curious, what was your senior tech lab, and what research project do you remember back in those days? What you decided to pursue as a research experience, and how did you go about selecting that as an opportunity?
So I think it's defunct now, but we had a video technology.
Yeah,
I think
with Ed
literally
Montgomery.
yeah, exactly. The technology is not even relevant anymore. It was like videotape and how to edit it. It was a lot of fun because you basically got to make movies. And I have an interest in that stuff, and that's what I did.
Very cool. Was there a movie that you made? I seem to remember that the research projects back then were to put together like a short film of some kind, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, we made a couple big hits, and maybe they're floating around in the hallways there somewhere. We left them there, and I don't know if anyone's got a VHS anymore, but if you do, find it.
Well, I'd be happy to invite you back here. We have the archive room that has a lot of stuff from the old facility, and I would say
Probably in there.
about half of what's in there is Ed Montgomery's tapes, not just from senior projects, but from stuff he used to film around the school, et cetera, et cetera. So you're more than welcome to come by. I'd be happy to show you around. Maybe we can find some of your stuff in there. Very
I'm in
cool.
there. Yeah, look, let's do it.
Yep. So in terms of transitioning, you went to Yale, which will obviously be of some interest to a lot of the kids that we have here. I'm curious what your process was in terms of maybe did you get recruited to play at Yale, or did you apply and get in, and then were you a walk-on? What was the situation there?
So I was a good high school pitcher and a pretty good student, and I was probably at the talent, or was at the talent level where I was like a fringe, low end Division I kind of talent, um, and I played on a travel baseball team that was very, very good. It was basically all the best players in Northern Virginia, and we would go around in the summer and fall, and the colleges would see you. And so I started to get some recruiting kind of feelers from teams in like the George Washington, William and Mary kind of range of baseball, but then also some real academically oriented schools in the Ivy League. And I think the first one was Columbia. And the guy kind of explained to me how Ivy League baseball works, and it sounded interesting. Obviously, you want to go to as good a school as you can, but I also wanted to play Division I baseball at the same time. So I kind of started to focus my attention on those schools, and we made a tape of me pitching, and sent it to a lot of them. And I had no connection with Yale, but it's a famous school, and my parents were like, "Why not send one there?" And the coach, a guy named John Stuper, who played for the St. Louis Cardinals in the major leagues, he just retired from Yale baseball like 5 months ago, and he won the 1982 World Series with the St. Louis Cardinals. Saw the tape, called me, was like, "I like your delivery. I like what I see. I don't really need to see much more." And when you're recruited to play in the Ivy League, they basically kind of help you get in a little bit. So I'm not sure I would have been admitted if I just kind of applied cold, but I was a relatively strong applicant for an athlete, recruited athlete. So I think I got in pretty smoothly once those two things kind of joined forces.
That's awesome. I'm curious that, you mentioned that Coach Stuper was with the Cardinals. I'm curious as to whether or not that had any influence in sort of the early stages of your career as you transitioned into working in baseball. Was there a connection there that maybe sort of helped you get into that area? Or
Oh yeah, huge. He helped me a couple of times as I got it started in baseball. When I was in college, I injured my shoulder and I had to miss a season. And in the Ivy League at that time, and I still think this is the case, they don't allow you to redshirt and play a fifth year. So if an athlete gets hurt, if a football player blows out his knee and needs surgery, they either just skip a year, or you sit out a year and retain your 4 years of eligibility, or you play that fifth year somewhere else. You transfer out of the conference. So I did door number two, which was take a year of absence. And when I did that, I interned with the Philadelphia Phillies, basically in like the ticket office. And that was through a connection that Coach Stuper had. And then later, when I decided to become a scout, he helped me because he knew the assistant scouting director with the Cardinals, a guy named Dan Kantrovitz, whom he had recruited unsuccessfully to come to Yale. And Dan went to Brown to play baseball. And then he got drafted and turned into a young scouting guy. So Coach Stuper helped me both times.
Very cool. Did your area of study in college have anything to do with moving on into that professional space?
It didn't, and I kind of made a pivot during the year off that I took when I first started. This was before 9/11. My dad worked in law enforcement in the federal government, and our family is half Arab, half Syrian, and so I was taking Arabic in my first 2 years at Yale. And then 9/11 happened like 2 weeks into it, and the class kind of exploded. It became a very popular area of study all of a sudden. And I remained interested in doing that. But then I hurt my shoulder. And during the year off, I had read the book Moneyball by Michael Lewis that had just come out. It changed baseball. And it was very clear that there was going to be this demand for more a different type of background for people in baseball, particularly in scouting, which I always loved watching other players while I was playing and evaluating them and seeing who got drafted and things like that. And so I just was like, man, I think this would be a really good path. It seems like a good opportunity right now. So during that year off, I took the time and focused on working in baseball to kind of get my resume going and work for the Phillies. And also a pitching coach in San Diego named Tom House, who's like a famous pitching coach. I went out and worked with him for the second half of the year. And so when that happened, I saw the potential and kind of focused on that route for the next couple of years.
That's awesome. So is it safe to say that you always had an interest in working in baseball? Was it a dream of yours to pitch an affiliated ball after you finished up in college, or what was sort of your thought process? And was it the injury that really transitioned your focus there?
Yeah, it was. I think I would have been a pretty fringy case to get signed or drafted to begin with. And then once I injured my shoulder, it was pretty much done. I did not think about working in baseball until that year and until that book came out. I read the book and kind of understood what was happening in the industry, even beyond that. And it seemed like there was going to be a real opportunity on the scouting side of things that just fits what I like to do what I like to do when I wasn't pitching, which is watch the players on the other team and kind of watch the game. When you're starting pitcher and you don't hit, you don't play when you're not pitching. So I had a lot of time to watch, and I would be interested in like the coaching side of things.
Very cool. So I'm curious now, you've been in the business now for, what is it? I guess 15 years now since you graduated, probably a little bit more. How have you seen things change over the course of that time? And, it seems like sort of the emphasis on big data as a huge separating factor in baseball and increasingly in other sports. That's really taken off in the last 5 to 10 years. There were some early adopters, obviously, and then there are some where it's just sort of exploded into more of a presence. How have you seen that evolution, and what has it sort of meant to you in terms of your career prospects?
Yeah, it's really been something to see it happen. My very first year was 2007. I was a local scout with the Cardinals. It was my first draft. And at that time, and when Moneyball came out in 2003, the big innovation in baseball was basically using statistics. It's as simplistic as it sounds. There was very little in the way of systematically deploying statistics to make all types of decisions. They were looked at, but nobody had started modeling them into their decision making in a real way until the Oakland A's and the St. Louis Cardinals kind of pioneered that in the early 2000s. And so when I got in, that was sort of the ongoing transition, and it persisted that way for another 5, 6, 7 years. And then unexpectedly, and I don't know that anyone was talking about it or saw it coming, a lot of radar-based tracking technologies that were developed for the golf world started to be commodified for baseball use. And we started to get this explosion, at first very subtly and then very dramatically, of radar technology and now camera technology that very precisely tracks the movements, first of the baseball, but then later the bat, and then now the skeletons of the people that are playing baseball. And it has totally overhauled the sport, for better or worse. It's overhauled the sport. And so when I started, there was a ton of emphasis on eyeball scouting and combining it with performance statistics. And now a lot of the video and radar explosion and all the tracking has morphed the scouting business yet again, because we have so much of that info at our fingertips, and it's sort of altered the way that scouts go about their work and the way that the way that their voice is integrated with other inputs. So this is continuing, and it's just been something that we've been constantly evolving with since like 2015, I would say. And at the time when the Cardinals hired me, they were a very forward-looking, statistically oriented operation. Jeff Luno and Dan Kantrovitz, who I mentioned, and Sig Mejdal were kind of progressive in that regard. And then Jeff got the Astros GM job in 2012, and he was a very progressive executive. And so when this tech revolution happened around 2015, we were way at the forefront of it. And so kind of helped me get ahead of a lot of the issues that have been involved in grappling how exactly do we use this stuff to go about our business.
That's very cool. It's just so funny to me, because I think somebody from the outside who is thinking about what baseball has always been a very numbers driven, statistically oriented sport, perhaps more so than any of the others. It just sounds to me like what's happened is that folks have determined that there are better numbers to look at beyond just the sort of counting stats, batting average, home runs, runs batted in, the things that you see in the front page of the papers. And that really it's been about taking a different set of data to look at, to try to be predictive in your analysis. Does that sound sort of on the nose?
A lot of the stuff that you mentioned is in there. It's really about modeling. So we have guys that look, we're trying to see which markers are predictive of future success. And so they will run regressions on everything that happened in the past and then keep track of how it predicts the future. And we're constantly tinkering with that. It's something that I don't have the technical expertise to do myself, but as an executive living it for 15 years, 16 years, I have a lot of feel for it and incorporate it into my thinking and help our analytics department, which Sig Mejdal runs, and which is 12, 13 people large now, chart the course of how we're going to keep our models fresh.
So it was really important to you, and in everything that I've read about sort of the transformation that's gone on within the Orioles over the course of the last several years. Without getting into too much of the detail, it sounds like it was extremely important to you to really build that base of data analysis and individuals who are going to be responsible in those areas. What was it like sort of coming into a pre-existing culture and then changing that sort of emphasis around to, this is the way we're going to do business? Everybody's, who's watched Moneyball has seen the scene, where Peter Brand comes into the office for the first time, and, they keep going back and forth, and he points at Peter and goes, he gets on base, over and over and over again. That scene is sort of iconic. What was it like engaging in that transition with what already existed within the offices there, and sort of changing people's thought processes to be a little bit more forward thinking?
Yeah, the Orioles was very unique, and it was difficult to do that. They had a kind of a fractured organizational dynamic when we came in, and Dan Duquette was the previous GM. He did a very good job in a lot of areas, but he didn't have total uh, wasn't able to have total alignment in the organization. And so when the ownership kind of changed over in 2018, decided to go down a totally new, fresh path. They let a lot of people go. And so we kind of had a skeleton crew operation when I got in here, which, is tough, but it makes it a little bit easier to just kind of start fresh. So we had a lot of turnover, a lot of new people and new hires, and so many that when you kind of get a huge number of new people in somewhere, a new culture kind of starts to take place. So we spent a lot of emphasis and capital on building an analytics department kind of uh, pragmatically, which Sig and I have experience doing, and we're able to get it up and running pretty quickly. And I now think that this is on par with a lot of the better analytics-based operations in the league.
Excellent. So I'm curious, thinking about, and we've talked a little bit about your time at TJ, and we've talked a little bit about your time in your professional career. I would love to know how you feel like going to TJ, which obviously is a school that's extremely STEM focused, and being surrounded by all of those bright minds that were sort of like-minded in their approach to academics. I'm curious as to how you feel like that time has influenced your professional career, sort of beginning, in sort of the very earliest stages, and now to where you're literally at the top of your profession. What sort of things have you drawn on from your experience at TJ?
Well, for me, I mean, the education that you get, I don't need to talk about that. I think that the biggest takeaway that I have from it is like I was saying, the um, supplementary education you get from just being around so many smart, driven kids, and you don't realize what that's doing for you, but it enriches you all day when you're sitting at lunch. You're having intelligent conversations. These are kids that are driven and make good decisions in their lives and are good influences to be around. And to have that in high school, it's not easy to find, and it really gives you a head start on kind of getting out into the real world where there's competition and there's technology that changes the way you go about your work all of a sudden. And I think that TJ prepares you for that as much as anywhere in high school.
Outstanding. So, if somebody is watching this, if one of our kids, is watching this on the Partnership Fund YouTube channel, and they're thinking to themselves, man, this looks really attractive to me. I would love to be able to work in sports, whether it's baseball or basketball or whatever it is that they would want to get into. What advice would you have for them in terms of, how to begin preparing for a career in that direction, where to put your foot in the door, perhaps how the landscape may have changed in the 15 years or so since you were sort of knocking on the door to get into this profession? What advice would you give to kids who are looking to follow in your footsteps, for lack of a better way of putting it?
Well, yeah, I mean, to use baseball as an example, but I think this applies to most sports now, but I can only really speak to baseball. There is now a huge thirst for people with technical skills. I did not really come up that way. I was able to kind of leverage my playing experience and then turn it into scouting experience. That path is a little bit more narrow now because of how technical the game has become. And speaking to Jefferson students, they probably have a lot of talent and skills and inclination in this area. It is very much in demand. We basically have two types of people in our analytics department. Putting it sort of simplistically, would be analysts and developers. And for the analysts, I would say, if you're going into college, a bachelor's in like statistics or applied math, or other stuff like physics, data science, or econ, finance, if there's like computational math focus is good, and the developers, it would be computer science. We take notice of that stuff on resumes when people are applying. And then when I say technical skills too, I also mean language, and not just programming languages, of which
Yeah.
those are, but like Spanish
Mhm.
is, half of our players almost are native Spanish speakers. So that's enormous too. I did not get a chance to study that as a kid. I didn't see this coming, and but I've tried to do it as a professional. But certainly, if somebody can get very proficient in Spanish, that's an enormous entry point to professional baseball.
That's outstanding. That's wonderful. I really, really appreciate your perspective on that, and I think it's going to be valuable for kids who are watching this. Going back to sort of your time at TJ, are there any teachers that you had that might have sort of really influenced you or inspired you, or that you'd love to shout out sort of as an opportunity here?
You know better than me, but I think they're probably all
Oh, I'm
happily
sure.
retired. So
Yeah, I'm
maybe
sure
it's
they are.
easier if you named who's still working there. I know Mrs. Shabra. I think she
Hmm.
just retired. I had her. She was a great
Yeah, the
chemistry
vast majority of
teacher.
those who are going to watch this are going to be alumni, so I'm sure they will be
Yeah,
able
so
to
they were
remember.
they were all great, but they've all probably moved on to other phases by now. So I don't know that I have much of a faculty connection there left.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's definitely, I'm sure that's the case. Excellent. Is there anything else you would want to discuss that sort of that you remember from your time back, when you were here at TJ, or any messages that you might want to communicate to the sort of the group at large?
No, I'm very proud to have gone there. I know it's the best high school in the country. I wish we had that fancy building that you've got behind you right now. It looked a lot
Yeah.
different when I was there. It makes me feel very old to see how different it is now. And I would love to see another baseball title sometime in the near future.
Excellent. Well, I'll be sure to keep you posted on that end. And as I mentioned, I'm sure we'd love to have you by at some point just to take a look around and see where things are right now. I stop by the old field at some point. Hopefully, we'll have to set that up sometime. Once again, I'm Mark Gray Mendez, Director of Development and Outreach for the TJ Partnership Fund, and this has been a great conversation with Mike Elias from the class of 2001, Executive Vice President and General Manager for the Baltimore Orioles. Mike, I can't thank you enough for your time. I know things are going to get busy here as you guys get ready for the winter meetings, and a lot of things moving forward that are going to take up your time. But it really means a lot that you would take the time to step over here and be with us for a little bit.
Great, yeah, and I'd love to see some TJ folks come up to Camden Yards. It's not a bad trip.
Oh, no doubt about it. We do it every Sunday, so much appreciated. Have a
Thank you.
great one. Thanks so
All
much.
right.